For centuries, knowledge has been hidden in plain sight across the sands of time. Whispers of lost civilizations, cryptic symbols, and forbidden histories have been erased or concealed. What if the truth was never lost, but hidden? Welcome to Eye of Ancient Mysteries, where the past speaks and the future listens. Sit back, open your mind, and prepare to uncover the untold secrets of our world. Let the journey begin now. The Tunguska Phenomenon: Secrets, Facts, and Mystery. The Tunguska Phenomenon: Secrets, Facts, and Mystery. One of the greatest enigmas of the 20th century remains the mysterious event that occurred on June 30, 1908, in the remote Siberian taiga near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. A blinding flash illuminated the sky, followed by a colossal explosion whose shockwave flattened over 2,000 square kilometers of forest. The blast was so powerful that it was registered by seismographs across the entire planet, and the night skies in Europe and Asia glowed for days afterward. But what exactly happened in that deserted corner of Siberia? Even today, scientists and researchers continue to argue about the nature of the so-called Tunguska event. Was it a meteorite, a comet, an alien spacecraft, or something far stranger? Perhaps a test of unknown technology or a natural phenomenon still beyond human understanding. The mysterious morning of June 30, 1908, eyewitness accounts describe an enormous fireball streaking across the sky from southeast to northwest, followed by a blinding light and an earth-shaking roar. The explosion occurred near the Tunguska River, not far from the settlement of Vanavara. People living hundreds of kilometers away felt the shock wave. Windows shattered, and some were knocked to the ground by the force. The Evenki people, who inhabited that region, spoke of a fiery serpent descending from the sky and of a deafening thunder that seemed to come from the heavens. Some thought it was the wrath of the gods. Others said it was a star falling to earth. The event left a lasting mark on their folklore and collective memory. First attempts at investigation at the time. The region was so remote and inaccessible that no one managed to reach the explosion site for many years. It was only in 1927 that the first scientific expedition, led by Russian researcher Leonid Kulik, finally reached the area. What they found stunned the world. The forest was flattened in a radial pattern. Trees lay in straight lines pointing away from the epicenter, as if blown down by a massive shock wave. Yet at the very center, some trees remained standing, stripped of branches and bark, but upright like blackened poles. There was no visible crater, no remains of a meteorite, no fragments of any kind. Kulik's expedition collected eyewitness accounts and took photographs, confirming the scale of the devastation. However, the absence of a crater or debris puzzled scientists and gave rise to countless hypotheses. The meteorite hypothesis. The most common explanation was that a stony meteorite or a small asteroid had exploded in the atmosphere about 5–10 kilometers above the ground, releasing energy equivalent to 10–15 megatons of TNT, roughly 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. According to this theory, The meteorite disintegrated completely before hitting the ground, which would explain the lack of a crater. Later studies of the soil revealed traces of tiny spherules containing nickel and other elements typical of extraterrestrial material, supporting, at least partially, the meteorite hypothesis. However, this explanation also left many questions unanswered. Why was there no clear trace of impact? Why were no large fragments found? And how could such an explosion have occurred without leaving any obvious remnants of the object itself? Alternative theories: comet, black hole, and Tesla's death ray. The comet hypothesis, another plausible explanation proposed by scientists, is that the Tunguska explosion was caused not by a solid meteorite, but by the nucleus of a comet, an icy body composed mainly of frozen gases and dust. When such an object enters the atmosphere, it heats up rapidly, vaporizes, and releases immense amounts of energy. This would explain the absence of any solid fragments or crater. The comet nucleus could have completely disintegrated before reaching the ground, leaving behind only microscopic traces of cosmic dust. Moreover, eyewitnesses described glowing atmospheric phenomena and luminous nights following the explosion, effects consistent with the scattering of ice crystals and fine particles in the upper atmosphere. However, the comet hypothesis also has weaknesses. A comet's density is extremely low, and many scientists question whether it could release enough energy to flatten such a vast area of forest. Some researchers argue that the observed damage pattern more closely resembles that of a shockwave produced by a dense, fast-moving object rather than a cloud of vaporized ice. The mini black hole hypothesis, one of the most exotic ideas about Tunguska, emerged in the 1970s when a group of astrophysicists suggested that the explosion could have been caused by a tiny black hole passing through the Earth. According to this theory, such a micro black hole would have entered the atmosphere at high speed, producing massive gravitational effects and an enormous release of energy as it interacted with matter. After passing through the Earth, it would have continued into space, leaving behind an invisible but catastrophic trail of destruction. Although this explanation is fascinating, it faces serious physical objections. No evidence of a corresponding exit point on the opposite side of the planet has ever been found, and calculations show that the likelihood of a micro black hole intersecting Earth is extremely small. Nevertheless, the very fact that such theories were considered shows how mysterious the Tunguska event remains, even after more than a century. Nikola Tesla and the death ray. Among the most controversial hypotheses is one that connects the Tunguska explosion with none other than the brilliant inventor Nikola Tesla. In 1908, Tesla was working on his ambitious Wardenclyffe Tower project in New York, a massive facility designed to transmit electrical energy wirelessly through the atmosphere and the Earth itself. Some conspiracy theorists and Tesla enthusiasts have speculated that he might have conducted an experiment with directed energy, an early version of his rumored death ray, and that the Tunguska explosion was an unintended consequence of this test. According to this idea, Tesla attempted to send a powerful energy beam toward the Arctic region as a demonstration of his global wireless power system. The beam, they claim, may have misfired and struck Siberia, causing the devastating explosion. Of course, there is no direct evidence to support this theory. However, it gained some popularity due to Tesla's well-known interest in long-distance energy transmission and his documented correspondence with Robert Peary, the famous Arctic explorer. Tesla allegedly offered to send power to Peary's expedition through the air, a fact that fuels the imagination of those who see a link to Tunguska. The UFO hypothesis, no great mystery, would be complete without an extraterrestrial explanation. Some researchers and UFO enthusiasts have proposed that the Tunguska event was actually the explosion of an alien spacecraft, perhaps a vehicle that malfunctioned or self-destructed to avoid crashing into a populated area. This theory was particularly popular in the Soviet Union during the 1960s and 1970s, when UFO research was flourishing. Supporters pointed to eyewitness reports of the fireball changing direction mid-flight, something that a natural meteorite or comet would not normally do. Others claim that the pattern of flattened trees could resemble the effect of a craft exploding in midair, with the central standing trees corresponding to the vertical trajectory of the blast. Still, mainstream science dismisses the UFO hypothesis as pure speculation. No metallic debris, alien artifacts, or radiation anomalies have ever been discovered at the site. Soviet research and new expeditions, after Leonid Kulik's pioneering expeditions in the 1920s and 1930s, the Soviet Union continued to study the Tunguska region sporadically over the following decades. Interest in the phenomenon rose again in the 1950s and 1960s, when new scientific methods and equipment allowed for more detailed research. One of the major questions remained the same: what exactly exploded in the sky above Tunguska, and why did it leave no crater? In 1958, a large-scale expedition led by Yuri Semenenko and Evgeny Krinov was organized. Using aerial photography and geological surveys, they confirmed the radial pattern of fallen trees and estimated the explosion's energy at between 10 and 15 megatons, comparable to a large thermonuclear bomb. Researchers collected soil samples and plant specimens, which revealed small glassy spherules containing nickel and iron, typical of cosmic dust. These findings seemed to support the meteorite hypothesis, but they still could not explain the total absence of any solid fragments. A devastation without a crater. One of the strangest features of the Tunguska explosion is precisely this lack of a visible impact crater. Normally, an object large enough to release such energy would leave a massive depression in the ground. Yet the Tunguska area shows only signs of intense heat, scorched vegetation, and flattened trees, no crater at all. This suggests that the explosion occurred several kilometers above the surface, releasing its energy in the air rather than on impact. Modern scientists refer to such events as airbursts. The most famous modern example is the Chelyabinsk meteor of 2013, which exploded about 30 kilometers above Russia. injuring over 1,000 people and shattering windows across the city. Its energy was estimated at about 500 kilotons, only a fraction of Tunguska's power, but a strikingly similar mechanism. The butterfly pattern of destruction. Aerial and satellite imagery have shown that the fallen trees form a pattern resembling a butterfly or a radial fan. The central area, around 8 kilometers wide, has trees still standing upright, while those around it are flattened outward for dozens of kilometers. Computer models suggest that such a pattern would be consistent with a low-angle explosion of a cosmic object entering the atmosphere from the southeast. The object likely exploded at a height of about 5 to 10 kilometers, with the shockwave propagating asymmetrically along its flight path. Radiation and magnetic anomalies. In the 1960s, Soviet geophysicists also measured magnetic and radioactive anomalies in the Tunguska region. The magnetic field in some spots appeared slightly disturbed, and traces of isotope shifts were detected in tree rings and soil layers. These anomalies led some to speculate that the object might have contained unusual materials, or even that it had been an artificial craft. However, subsequent studies found that the radiation levels were consistent with natural background variations and possibly linked to later atmospheric nuclear tests. Biological aftereffects. Local legends and scientific observations alike note unusual biological phenomena in the decades after the explosion. Trees and plants in the region reportedly grew faster than those in surrounding areas. Some researchers attributed this to the enrichment of soil with minerals, or to the clearing effect of the explosion that opened space for sunlight and water to reach deeper layers. Others, more speculatively, proposed that radiation or a shock-induced mutation effect could have played a role. Modern scientific consensus today: the majority of scientists accept the airburst of a small asteroid or comet as the most likely cause of the Tunguska event. The estimated size of the object was between 50 and 80 meters in diameter, large enough to release the equivalent of 10 to 15 megatons of TNT when it disintegrated in the atmosphere. In 2013, a group of Italian researchers led by Luca Gasparini suggested that Lake Chico, a small body of water located about 8 kilometers from the presumed epicenter, might actually be a secondary impact crater formed by a fragment of the Tunguska object. However, subsequent surveys have not confirmed this hypothesis definitively. Sediment cores suggest the lake may have formed long before 1908. Despite extensive study, the mystery continues to inspire both scientific investigation and speculative imagination. Eyewitness accounts. The most vivid details about the Tunguska explosion come from the people who actually saw and felt it. The majority of eyewitnesses were Evenki hunters, Russian settlers, and local peasants living hundreds of kilometers from the epicenter. Their testimonies were collected years later by Leonid Kulik's expeditions and remain invaluable historical evidence. One witness, Semen Semenov, living about 60 kilometers from the blast, described the moment as follows: "At breakfast time, I was sitting on the porch facing north, when suddenly I saw that directly to the north, Over the Tunguska Road, the sky split in two, and fire appeared high and wide above the forest. The split in the sky grew larger, and the entire northern part was covered with fire. At that moment, I felt great heat, as if my shirt had caught fire. I wanted to tear it off and throw it away, but then the sky slammed shut, and there was a loud bang. I was thrown a few meters by the blast. After that, I saw a column of black smoke rise, and there was a strong noise, as if stones were falling or cannons were firing. Other witnesses reported seeing a fiery sphere moving across the sky, accompanied by deafening thunderclaps that echoed for minutes. Some said the object changed direction before exploding, an observation that has fueled many of the more speculative theories about the event. The Evenki perspective. For the Evenki people, who lived in the taiga and depended on reindeer herding and hunting, the explosion was a terrifying supernatural event. They described a god of thunder descending from the sky, devastating the forest and killing animals. Even decades later, when Kulik's expedition tried to interview locals, many refused to go near the site, believing it to be cursed. They called the place the Valley of Evil Fire. Some Evenki legends speak of a shaman's curse or a heavenly punishment. Others tell of spirits descending in fiery chariots, destroying the forest as a sign of divine anger. These myths blend ancient cosmology with the memory of a real event that profoundly impacted their worldview. Impact on the global scientific community. Although news of the explosion spread slowly, Siberia was extremely isolated at the time. By the 1920s, the Tunguska event had become one of the great unsolved mysteries of the modern age. Scientists around the world debated its cause, often in the pages of popular magazines and academic journals alike. Astronomers tried to link it with observations of meteors or comets that had passed near Earth in June 1908. Some even suggested it could have been a small fragment of Comet Enki, which crosses Earth's orbit periodically. For decades, Tunguska remained a reference point in discussions of cosmic impacts. Only much later, after the discovery of the Chicxulub crater in Mexico, believed to have caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, did scientists fully appreciate how catastrophic such impacts could be on a global scale. Tunguska in folklore and popular culture. Over the years, the Tunguska event has entered popular imagination as a symbol of mystery and cosmic power. It has inspired countless books, documentaries, films, and even video games. Writers of speculative fiction often depict the explosion as the crash of an alien spacecraft or as the detonation of some lost ancient technology. Soviet and later Russian science fiction authors frequently referenced Tunguska as a gateway to other dimensions or as evidence of extraterrestrial contact. In the West, the event appeared in episodes of shows like The X-Files, Doctor Who, and Ancient Aliens. It has even been woven into conspiracy theories linking it with secret military experiments, Nikola Tesla's inventions, and the supposed testing of early nuclear devices. A human tragedy that could have been far worse, although the blast was unimaginably powerful. It occurred in one of the most remote regions of the planet. Had it exploded over a populated area, it could have wiped out an entire city. Modern simulations show that if the Tunguska object had detonated over St. Petersburg, London, or New York, it would have obliterated everything within a 20-kilometer radius and caused fires and destruction for tens of kilometers more. In this sense, humanity was extremely fortunate. The vast emptiness of Siberia absorbed the full force of one of the greatest cosmic impacts in recorded history. New scientific approaches. In recent decades, the Tunguska phenomenon has continued to attract scientists from around the world. Thanks to advances in aerospace observation, geology, and computer modeling, researchers have been able to analyze the event with greater precision than ever before. Modern simulations confirm that the explosion was likely caused by an asteroid or comet fragment approximately 50–80 meters in diameter, entering the atmosphere at a speed of about 27 km/h. It would have heated up to thousands of degrees Celsius, producing a massive shock wave when it disintegrated about 5–10 kilometers above ground level. This process is known as an airburst, and it releases its energy outward and downward in an expanding cone. Such explosions can devastate huge areas without leaving an impact crater. Exactly what happened at Tunguska. Geological and environmental studies. In the 1990s and 2000s, Russian and Italian researchers conducted detailed geological and biological surveys of the Tunguska region. They studied soil composition, tree rings, and microscopic particles trapped in peat layers from 1908. These studies found increased concentrations of nickel, iridium, and cobalt, elements typically associated with extraterrestrial material. This reinforced the theory of a cosmic origin, though the specific nature of the object, asteroid viz. Comet, remains debated. At the same time, researchers found no trace of radioactive contamination or unnatural isotopes, effectively ruling out the idea of a nuclear explosion or artificial weapon test. Lake Checo. The hidden crater. Perhaps the most intriguing modern hypothesis concerns Lake Checo, a small oval-shaped lake located about 8 kilometers from the supposed epicenter. In 2007, an Italian research team led by Luca Gasparini suggested that the lake might actually be a secondary impact crater created by a surviving fragment of the Tunguska object. Their sonar scans revealed an unusual conical depression beneath the lakebed, consistent with a high-velocity impact. Moreover, sediment analysis showed a sudden layer corresponding to around 1908. However, later Russian studies argued that the lake existed before the event and that its shape could be explained by natural river processes. The debate continues today, with no definitive conclusion. Atmospheric effects and global phenomena. Historical records from Europe and Asia confirm that in the nights following the Tunguska explosion, bright night skies were visible thousands of kilometers away. In London and St. Petersburg, people reported being able to read newspapers at midnight without artificial light. These unusual phenomena were caused by the dispersion of fine particles and ice crystals high in the atmosphere, which reflected sunlight long after sunset. Similar effects were observed after large volcanic eruptions, such as Krakatoa in 1883. Some modern climatologists suggest that Tunguska may have briefly influenced Earth's atmosphere and weather patterns, though not enough to leave a long-term global mark. Tunguska and planetary defense. Today, the Tunguska event serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers posed by near-Earth objects, NEOs. Astronomers now estimate that thousands of asteroids in the 50–100-meter range pass close to our planet every year, some at distances smaller than that of the Moon. The 2013 Chelyabinsk meteor provided a modern example of what can happen when such an object enters the atmosphere. Fortunately, it exploded high enough to avoid fatalities, but it injured more than 1,000 people, mostly from shattered glass. If a Tunguska-sized object were to hit today, the consequences could be catastrophic for any urban area beneath it. This has spurred international efforts to detect, track, and deflect potential impactors before they reach Earth. The ongoing mystery, despite all technological advances, Tunguska remains an open question. Scientists generally agree on the physical mechanism of an atmospheric explosion, but the exact nature of the object, its composition, and why no definitive fragments were ever found are still matters of debate. For some, Tunguska is simply a reminder of the randomness of cosmic events. For others, it remains a doorway into deeper mysteries of natural forces, lost technologies, or even extraterrestrial intervention. The silence of the taiga keeps its secret well. Over a century later, the forest has regrown, covering the scars of that morning in 1908. Only the radial pattern of trees and the stories of the Evenki people hint at the day when the sky opened, fire descended, and the earth trembled beneath the weight of a celestial visitor. Reflections on a cosmic mystery, the Tunguska event is more than just an unexplained explosion. It is a moment in history that revealed how vulnerable our planet can be to forces beyond its control. For centuries, humans believed that the heavens were distant and unchanging, but Tunguska reminded us that space is alive, dynamic, and sometimes dangerous. It was the first time in modern history that humankind witnessed the destructive power of a cosmic impact, even if indirectly. No other event of its kind had ever been recorded with such detail and global awareness. It became a bridge between ancient awe of the heavens and modern scientific understanding of celestial phenomena. A catalyst for science and imagination, the mystery of Tunguska inspired generations of scientists to study meteors, comets, and asteroids. It laid the groundwork for the modern field of planetary defense and for understanding the frequency and danger of near-Earth objects. At the same time, the absence of definitive evidence, no crater, no recovered fragments, opened the door for countless interpretations. From speculative physics to wild conspiracy theories, Tunguska became a blank canvas for the imagination. Writers, filmmakers, and thinkers have used it as a symbol of the unknown, a place where science and mystery meet, where nature's power borders on the supernatural. In Soviet literature, it became a metaphor for the collision between civilization and the cosmos. the idea that humanity is not isolated, but part of a vast and unpredictable universe. In Western culture, Tunguska often represents forbidden knowledge or hidden truth. The idea that somewhere something extraordinary happened, and its meaning is still concealed beneath layers of forest and time. Spiritual and philosophical interpretations. For the Evenki and other indigenous peoples, the Tunguska explosion is woven into myth as an act of cosmic retribution or renewal. For them, the forest that burned and grew again symbolizes the eternal cycle of destruction and rebirth. Philosophically, the event forces us to confront our fragility. A single object, no larger than a city block, was capable of releasing energy thousands of times greater than any weapon of its era. It shows that even in our age of technology, humanity remains at the mercy of the universe. Yet it also reveals our resilience, the ability to question, explore, and seek truth even in the face of incomprehensible events. Tunguska's legacy today, more than a century later, Tunguska continues to fascinate. Scientists return to the site, armed with drones, satellites, and advanced sensors. Writers and artists continue to reinterpret its meaning. Every new discovery, every grain of cosmic dust or isotope anomaly, adds another piece to the puzzle. In 2008, exactly 100 years after the explosion, international conferences were held in Russia, Italy, and the United States. Researchers, historians, and enthusiasts gathered to commemorate the event and share new data. The general conclusion was clear: Tunguska remains an essential reminder that Earth is part of a living, ever-changing cosmos. A warning and a wonder ultimately. The Tunguska phenomenon stands as both a warning and a wonder. A warning that even small celestial objects can unleash unimaginable power, and a wonder at the fact that life on Earth endures despite the universe's immense and unpredictable forces. When we look up at the night sky today, we can imagine that morning in 1908, a fiery trail cutting across the Siberian heavens, a thunderous explosion that shook the world, and the stunned silence that followed. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Tunguska is not what caused it, but what it reveals about us. The endless human drive to understand the unknown, to transform fear into knowledge, and to find meaning in the fire that once fell from the sky.